I wasn't looking for a reason to doubt her. It was a Wednesday morning, just another cloudy Portland day. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the rain drumming lightly against the windows, the kind of morning that usually felt comforting. But that day, something felt off. Claire had rushed downstairs, heels in one hand, blouse half buttoned, muttering about being late for a staff development meeting. She barely touched the breakfast I'd made, just kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her phone, then paused, doubling back upstairs for her laptop. She left her phone on the counter. Unusual. Claire never left her phone anywhere. She was glued to it. Emails from students, calendar alerts, Pinterest recipes. It was like an extra limb. But that morning it just sat there, face up, screen unlocked, buzzing. I wasn't trying to snoop, though I really wasn't. I even turned away, took a sip of coffee, told myself I was being paranoid. We'd been married for nearly 9 years. We had matching coffee mugs, a shared Spotify playlist, a dog named Clover. Nothing about Claire ever felt like a lie. Not until that moment. Another buzz. I glanced. Nathan. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. You left your earring in the car. The words hit like ice water down my spine. I froze, the mug in my hand trembling. I reread it, and again. The words didn't change. The emoji didn't disappear. My breath caught in my chest, heart thudding like a slow warning drum. She came back down, then calling out, Got it! Sorry, babe, I'm heading out. Don't wait up, okay? Could be a late one. She was already at the door when I turned around. Sure, I said, somehow managing to make it sound normal. She blew a kiss, completely oblivious to the fact that our marriage had just been decapitated by a push notification. The door closed. Silence. I stared at the phone still in my hand. The timestamp said the message had come in less than 2 minutes ago. My hands moved without thinking, scrolling upward. I didn't want to see. I had to see. The thread was full of hotel bookings, pet names, sneaky photos taken in parking garages, coded references to nights, grading papers, and conference weekends. There was nothing to decode. It was all there. In plain English and dirty emoji. Nathan. I had no idea who he was. But he was with my wife. Repeatedly and boldly. No shame, no secrecy. Just this new reality I'd apparently been blind to for months. I sat down at the kitchen table, the screen burning into my vision. My mind reeled, nausea creeping into my gut, my jaw clenched so tightly I felt my teeth ache. Claire. My Claire. I thought about all the late nights she'd come home exhausted, makeup smudged, shoes in hand. I thought about the weekends she'd said she needed space, the quiet disconnection that had crept in over the last year. I'd blamed stress, school, maybe even myself. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't space she needed. It was someone else. I should have confronted her. Right then. Should have driven to that fake meeting and pulled her out by the lie. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop. Nathan, Portland, Nathan plus Claire. Anything. I found him in 3 clicks. Nathan Kessler, 42nd CEO of an edtech startup, former TEDx speaker, member of Portland's 40 Under 40. His LinkedIn profile glared at me. Photos of him standing on stages, smiling at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, shaking hands with mayors. But it was the Instagram that really gutted me, because she was there. Claire, my wife. In the background of a rooftop party, hair curled, laughing, glass of wine in hand, her hand resting on Nathan's shoulder. Tag location. The Indigo Hotel, downtown Portland, 2 weeks ago. She had told me she was at a literacy workshop in Bend. My fingers curled into fists, heat flaring behind my eyes. And then I saw her. Not Claire. Her. In 3 or 4 posts, always by Nathan's side. Tall. Dark brown hair pulled into a tight bun. Lean, confident frame. Dressed like a woman who didn't believe in wrinkles or indecision. Her Instagram bio read, Melissa Kessler. Fiction writer, mother, wife. Wife. So Nathan had a wife. Just like I had Claire. And suddenly everything shifted. I wasn't alone in this. Someone else had been betrayed. Someone else had been fed lies, made to feel crazy, kept in the dark while the people we trusted danced behind our backs. I stared at Melissa's profile photo. It wasn't pity I felt. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about clarity. And something inside me whispered, You're not the only one who deserves to know the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Claire curled up beside me like everything was normal. Her breathing was slow, steady, peaceful. It was almost comical, the ease with which she drifted off into dreams while I lay beside her in full-blown psychological freefall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, not in pornographic detail, but worse. The casualness, the intimacy, the soft touches, the inside jokes I would never understand. The version of her that existed with Nathan that she never showed me. At 4:13 a.m., I got up and made coffee. Again. My hands trembled as I stirred the cream into the mug, the silence of the kitchen louder than any scream. I couldn't keep floating in this fog of pain and disbelief. I needed facts. I needed structure. If I didn't give my mind a mission, it was going to eat itself alive. So I went back to my laptop. I started with public records. I searched Nathan Kessler's name through every free database I could find. Then I paid $29.99 for a background check. I didn't care. I would have paid 10 times that. I wanted to know who this man was. What made him worth risking my life, my marriage, my sanity? The results came back fast. Nathan Kessler, 42nd, born in California, B.A. from Stanford, MBA from Yale, CEO and co-founder of ClearPath, a rising edtech startup now valued at $15 million. He owned 2 properties, a condo in downtown Portland and a lakeside home in Hood River, married to Melissa Kessler. No kids. His public image was pristine. There were no lawsuits, no scandals, no unpaid taxes. The man had a golden resume and a photo op smile to match. A few articles mentioned him as a visionary in digital education. One profile even called him a future political candidate to watch. And Claire? She was always fascinated by power. She never said it, but I saw it in the way her eyes lit up when she talked about authors she admired, professors she once studied under. She liked minds that filled rooms. Nathan wasn't just another man. He was exactly the kind of man she wanted to be associated with. But it was the Instagram that unlocked something deeper. As I scrolled through Nathan's feed, I saw a pattern. Claire wasn't in every photo. He was too smart for that. But she was there. A wine glass held by a hand I recognized. A scarf she borrowed from me draped over her shoulder in a blurry background. Comments from her account under posts that didn't mention her at all. Just a simple fire emoji or an inside joke that made no sense to anyone else. And Melissa. She was in fewer photos now. The older ones showed a happy couple, smiling on a rooftop in Santorini, laughing at a winery in Napa, her hand in his on the deck of a sailboat. But recently, she'd faded into the margins. One post caught my eye. It was from 3 weeks ago. Grateful for the peace that comes from building something with someone who understands the weight. No tags, no context, just that caption, with a black and white photo of Nathan's hand resting over someone else's, on a leather armrest in what looked like a first-class airplane cabin. The nails on that hand weren't Melissa's. They were Claire's. I recognized the polish. A weird, pearlescent pink she had only started wearing in the last month. She called it barely scandalous. My stomach turned. I clicked out of Instagram and typed in Melissa's name next. I found her author website. Sparse, elegant. A photo of her in a soft gray sweater looking over her shoulder on a misty beach. She hadn't published a novel in 3 years. Her blog hadn't been updated since last summer. Her bio was short and formal. Melissa Kessler is a fiction writer and former editor. She lives in Portland with her husband and 2 rescue dogs. I checked her Twitter. It was locked. Instagram, too. Private, smart. But there was one clue. A comment on a photo of a bookshelf posted by a friend of hers. "You're too quiet lately. Hope you're okay. Miss you." It was dated 2 days ago. Melissa knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what. I leaned back in my chair, the cursor blinking on a blank page in front of me. My thoughts swirled like fog off the Willamette River. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just betrayed. I was tethered to another person in this exact same pain. Someone who had no idea that her world was teetering on the same ledge as mine. The question was, should I tell her? And the answer came clear and immediate, yes. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because she deserved the truth. The same truth that had been dumped in my lap with no warning, no filter, no compassion. She deserved better than silence. She deserved someone to look her in the eye and say, "You're not crazy. You're not alone." I stared at Melissa's author photo again. That calm, steady expression. That composure. And I wondered, would she cry? Would she scream? Or would she, like me, pour herself a cup of coffee, open a laptop, and start taking the world apart piece by piece? It took me 2 days to build up the nerve, not because I was afraid she'd yell at me or call me a liar. No, I was afraid she'd look me in the eye and say something I already feared, that none of this mattered, that Nathan had cheated before, that Claire wasn't the first, that maybe Melissa already knew and didn't care. But the thing about betrayal is, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. You can't go back to pretending your world is whole, and you sure as hell can't sit in the knowledge alone. So I reached out. It started with a message through the contact form on our author website. Just one line. You don't know me, but I believe we've been betrayed by the same two people. If you're willing to talk, I'll meet you anywhere. I included no names, no details, just a burner email and a location suggestion. The Rusted Fox Cafe, 10 a.m. Saturday, neutral, public, safe. I didn't expect a reply, but the next morning there it was. I'll be there, don't be late. She arrived 3 minutes early. I watched her through the cafe window before she saw me. Melissa Kessler was the kind of woman who walked into a room like she'd already read the ending. She wore a charcoal coat cinched tight at the waist, leather gloves, and dark sunglasses that made her look less like a betrayed wife and more like someone returning from a secret mission. I stood when she entered. She removed her glasses, gave me a once-over, curious, guarded, not unfriendly, and sat across from me without a word. I'm Lucas, I offered. I know, she said. Your wife's Instagram is sloppy. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and set it on the table between us. Her wallpaper was a picture of a dog, not Nathan. Okay, she said, folding her hands neatly. Start talking. I didn't ramble. I didn't try to soften the blow. I told her what I'd found, dates, messages, photos. I slid my own phone across the table, open to a folder titled simply Truth. Her eyes scanned it without flinching. When she finally spoke, her voice was cool. I suspected. He's been distant for months. Came home smelling like wine he doesn't drink. Started getting texts from people named Mike and work. He never was good at lying, but I didn't want to be dramatic. I raised an eyebrow. Dramatic? She shrugged. That's what people say when women get emotional. You get called dramatic, paranoid, clingy. So I waited for proof. Well, I said, gesturing toward the phone. There it is. She looked at it a moment longer, then slowly slid it back to me. Thank you for being the one to show me. I expected her to cry, to excuse herself, to break. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, exhaled slowly, and said, Let's ruin them. I blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, she said, voice low and even. I don't want an apology. I don't want a sit-down conversation. I don't want him stammering through a list of reasons why this just happened. I want consequence. Real consequence. I sat back, a slow grin creeping into my expression. I thought I was alone in that. You're not, she said, but I won't go nuclear without a plan. Good, I replied, because I've got one. We sat in that cafe for the next 2 hours, building something between us. Not romance, not friendship. Strategy. I told her about the teaching award Claire was receiving next month, the one she had been obsessing over since spring. Melissa told me about the upcoming gala Nathan's company was sponsoring, how much press it would attract, how important it was for his career. 2 perfect stages, 2 perfect masks. All we had to do was pull them off, but we weren't amateurs. We didn't want a scene. We wanted precision. We wanted exposure that felt surgical. Public, yes, but controlled. Enough to fracture their image permanently without giving them a chance to twist the narrative. Melissa's eyes sharpened as I spoke. She had the focus of a sniper. We'll need more than screenshots, she said. We need dates, hotel receipts, travel overlaps. If they can deny even one detail, they'll deny everything. I've got some, I replied. Not everything. Claire's careful. No credit cards, no trails. She used Nathan's, Melissa said, smiling thinly. His company card, probably. Dumb move. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in days. You're good at this, I said. I was married to a liar for 8 years, she replied. You learn things. The conversation shifted then, from facts to tone. We planned the timing, the delivery. Who would get what and when? Who would see what first? We decided Claire's school board would receive the screenshots the morning of the award ceremony, not anonymously. I would sign my name. Nathan's investors would get the expense reports the night before the gala. Melissa knew exactly where to send them. She had access. This could cost him everything, I said, not as a question, but as a confirmation. Melissa nodded, her voice soft but lethal. That's the point. By the time we finished our drinks, the tension had melted into something like relief. Two strangers, one betrayal, one mission. We stood. She offered her hand. Thank you, she said. For what? For not letting me go through this alone? I took her hand. You either. She turned to leave, then paused, looked back. When this is over, she said, don't feel bad about not forgiving her. I stared at her. I wasn't planning on it. She smiled, and then she was gone. But something had changed. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was swimming towards something sharp, something just. The beginning of the end had arrived, and this time I was holding the match. It was raining again. Portland rain had a way of seeping into everything. Your clothes, your bones, your mood. It didn't pour or thunder. It just fell. Relentless, soft, patient. The kind of rain that knew how to wait. That morning I stood by the cafe window with my third black coffee in hand, watching the slow gray curtain descend over the street like a silent prophecy. It felt appropriate. Melissa arrived on time again. She stepped in with the rain still clinging to her coat, her dark hair slightly damp at the ends, face clean of makeup, eyes sharper than I remembered. She looked like someone who had made peace with what had to be done, and had already rehearsed every move. Let's do this, she said simply, sliding into the booth across from me, setting her bag down like it carried something heavier than paper and glass. I nodded. No pleasantries, no catching up. The air between us was cool, not cold, focused. We spent the next 2 hours building the framework, what we called the sequence. The sequence had 4 phases: collection, exposure, isolation, and collapse. Collection was mostly done. Between Melissa and me, we had over 70 screenshots, messages, emails, photos, hotel receipts, digital calendars. Claire had left a trail, not just with her phone, but with our shared Google account. She forgot I still had access. Her calendar was full of curriculum committee meetings and evening grading blocks. Cross-reference that with Nathan's travel photos, his Uber history, which Melissa still had access to, and the puzzle clicked together almost too perfectly. She got cocky, Melissa said, scrolling through her phone. They always do. Her voice was flat without bitterness, like a surgeon talking over an open heart. I envied her detachment. Mine still flickered. She used my laptop the night she booked their wine weekend, I added, pulling up the search history. She was right next to me, said she was ordering takeout. Melissa shook her head, a small, sad smile tugging at her lips. They weren't even careful. And that was the thing that stuck with me. Not just the betrayal, but the laziness, the arrogance, as if I wouldn't notice, as if I didn't deserve better than being lied to in plain sight. Phase 2. Exposure. We decided to start with Claire's award night. She was receiving a district-wide teaching honor, Educator of the Year, at a formal dinner held in the school auditorium. I'd already RSVP'd as her husband. I was expected to be there, to clap, to smile, to take photos. Melissa handed me a flash drive. Everything you need is here. I organized it by date. The tone of the messages escalates nicely. You'll want to start with the early ones. They're just flirty. Save the explicit ones for the end. You're thorough, I said. I write fiction, she replied. Pacing matters. We planned the release like a show. At 7:10 p.m., 10 minutes before Claire would take the stage, I'd send a mass email to her principal, the superintendent, and the school board. Subject line, a matter of ethics, Claire Addison. Inside, a short paragraph and a Google Drive link to the folder. Nothing angry, nothing emotional, just the truth. Let them draw their own conclusions. And then we smile. I added, feeling the steel had returned to my spine. We clap when she walks up, and we leave during dessert. Melissa smirked, pleased. As for Nathan, his unraveling would be less public at first. His firm, Clear Path, was co-sponsoring a high-profile education tech gala the following weekend. Melissa had once helped coordinate logistics, back when she still played the role of perfect corporate wife. She knew exactly who to send the files to. The board, the investors, the press contacts. But the jewel in the crown. Nathan had submitted his company for a national innovation grant worth nearly $500,000. The board was reviewing finalists that very week. You think this will tank it? I asked. Melissa looked up from her tablet, her tone matter-of-fact. They require a moral integrity clause. Infidelity's not enough. But misuse of company funds to support the affair, that's fraud. Expense reports? I asked. She tapped her screen, flipped it around. Wine tastings in Sonoma, business class flights to Chicago, hotel suites during developer retreats. By early afternoon, Melissa called. She was calm, almost eerily so. Nathan's board has called an emergency meeting, she said, her voice like a scalpel, sharp and cool. He's been asked to take an indefinite leave. Their legal team is already combing through his spending history. There's blood in the water now. I didn't feel joy, not satisfaction either, just a hollow clarity, like someone had finally wiped the fog from the mirror and shown me exactly what had always been there. And Claire, Melissa asked after a pause. Her school's launched a formal review of her conduct, I replied. They're trying to keep it quiet, but parents are already talking. Melissa exhaled softly. Not triumphant, not bitter, just tired. It's like watching a structure you thought was indestructible slowly buckle, and realizing it wasn't the wind. It was rot from the inside. I said nothing. Because she was right. By sunset, the tone of Claire's messages changed. They became less frantic, more fragile. I finally read one. Claire, Mark, please. I know you're angry, but this is getting out of control. People are saying awful things. Can we talk? Just once. Please. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about the version of her I used to love. The woman who danced barefoot in our kitchen, who cried during animal rescue commercials, who once planned a birthday scavenger hunt for me that ended with a note under my pillow. Was she ever real? Or just a character she played until someone with more shines entered the room? I closed the message. Didn't reply. Claire had built her world around appearances. Perfect wife, respected teacher, pillar of the community. But now the facade was splintering. Her curated image couldn't survive the weight of her choices. The parent group she once led stopped replying to her emails. The charity board quietly removed her from next month's event. Her students whispered when she walked into class, their parents whispering louder still. And Nathan? He was unraveling faster. Melissa sent me a screenshot from one of his company's internal Slack channels. Anonymous comments from junior staffers. So much for integrity. I always thought he was too smooth. Guess charisma doesn't cover embezzlement. One of the firm's top investors issued a public statement the next day. We are reevaluating our association with ClearPath pending resolution of recent ethical concerns. Translation, he's poison now. Melissa and I didn't gloat. We didn't send taunts. We just watched it happen from a distance, like people watching a fire they didn't start but refused to put out. Still, even with the damage spreading, a quiet part of me wondered, was it enough? I wasn't looking for vengeance anymore, but I was looking for weight. I needed the consequences to matter. I needed them to last longer than a scandal's life cycle. I wanted them to learn something, anything, from the rubble of their arrogance. 3 days later, Claire showed up at my apartment. It was just after 7. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting gold light through the blinds. I hadn't expected her. She stood on the porch in a beige sweater and jeans, hair tied back messily, face bare. She looked like someone trying to shrink. When I opened the door, she didn't speak, just held my gaze. I didn't come to argue, she said finally, her voice rough, or to ask you to take me back. I said nothing. She hesitated, then pulled something from her pocket. A ring, her wedding band. She held it out. I thought I'd feel something when I took it off. I didn't. I took it, not out of sentimentality, but out of finality. She stepped back. I don't know what happens next for me, she said, but I know I did this. I know I hurt you, and no apology will fix it. Her voice cracked then. The Claire I knew, the version I married, might have fought, deflected, rationalized. This one didn't. This one stood there in the fading light, small and ruined. I nodded once. I hope you find peace. She gave a half smile. You already have. Then she turned and walked away. And just like that, the door between us finally closed. For good. The weeks after Claire's visit passed in a kind of quiet that felt earned, not empty. For the first time in what felt like forever, I woke up and didn't immediately check my phone for lies. The air in my apartment didn't feel like it was holding its breath. It felt clean. Still, honest. Outside, spring had shifted gears. The cherry blossoms had begun to fall, littering the sidewalks like soft confetti. Rain gave way to warmer winds. And in that stillness, life crept back in. Not all at once, but in quiet moments that asked nothing from me. I filled the silence with things I'd forgotten I loved. I returned to my old camera, the one that had dust on its lens since long before Claire began staying out late. I walked the city again, letting my feet find their rhythm along the Willamette, through Laurelhurst Park, across the steel bridges that crisscrossed the water like a spine of something ancient and resilient. And for the first time in months, when I looked through my viewfinder, I saw beauty again. Not just structure, not just shadow and light, but truth. Melissa and I spoke occasionally, not as co-conspirators anymore, but as survivors orbiting the same wound. We didn't rehash what we'd done. We didn't need to. There was a mutual understanding that the storm had passed and that we had both, in some strange, irreversible way, closed a chapter. One evening she invited me over for dinner. Her apartment was smaller than I expected, lined with books, well-worn in furniture, and 2 dogs that barked once at me before settling into silent observation. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and lemon. She cooked without asking me what I liked, and I appreciated the decisiveness of it. We ate on her balcony overlooking the sleepy streets of northeast Portland. The city buzzed below, but up there it felt distant or muffled, safe. "I'm going to Italy," she said after a long pause between bites. I looked up. "When?" "Next month. I booked the ticket yesterday." She sipped her wine, then shrugged with a small smile. "There's a writer's retreat in Florence. I've been putting it off for years. No more waiting." I nodded. "That sounds perfect." "You should go somewhere too," she said. "Not to escape, just to reset." I smiled. "I've been thinking about Iceland." She raised an eyebrow. "Why Iceland?" "I don't know," I said, staring into my glass. "Something about standing under the northern lights in a place where no one knows your name. It feels like the kind of silence I want to hear." Melissa laughed, not mockingly, just warm. "Then go." I helped her clear the plates. We didn't hug goodbye, didn't make promises to call or write. When I left her apartment, I felt something loosen in my chest. A gentle kind of parting that didn't require closure because it had never been about beginnings. That night I sat on my balcony with a notebook and wrote a list. Not a bucket list, not a plan, just truths. Things I had ignored for years. Things I wanted to remember about myself, about what I deserved. At the top I wrote, "I am not a man who waits in silence while someone else decides my worth." 2 weeks later, I packed a bag and bought the ticket. Not to run, not to punish, just to move forward. The airport was busy that morning, filled with people in a rush to be anywhere but here. As I stood in line, clutching my boarding pass, I caught sight of a couple ahead of me, young, laughing, sharing earbuds. For a second it hit me, the ache of what I thought I had with Claire. But instead of pain, I felt peace, because now I wasn't pretending. I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. I had already chosen myself. And as the plane lifted into the sky, the city shrinking below like a memory finally allowed to fade, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some people say betrayal changes you, but that's not exactly true. Betrayal doesn't change who you are. It strips away who you were pretending to be. It forces you to look in the mirror and admit what you tolerated, what you turned away from, what you knew deep down but didn't want to see. I used to believe that forgiveness was the highest form of healing, that to truly move on, you had to let people back in. But now I understand, sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is close the door gently, lock it, and walk away without looking back. What Claire and Nathan did wasn't just about broken vows. It wasn't just sex, or lies, or secrets whispered in hotel rooms. It was about contempt for truth, about people who built their lives on performance and assumed the rest of us would just keep applauding. But we didn't. Melissa and I didn't choose vengeance. We chose clarity. And that clarity, sharp and honest and unrelenting, was enough to collapse the towers they'd built on charm and deception. I don't regret how it ended. Not the emails, not the exposures, not the silence that followed. Because the moment we stop protecting people from the consequences of their actions is the moment we reclaim our own power. And there's nothing cruel about that. There's just truth. Plain, unflinching truth. What surprised me most wasn't how easily Claire crumbled. It was how quietly I survived. I thought I'd be ruined, consumed by bitterness or shame or grief. But the moment I stopped fighting to be understood by someone who never really saw me was the moment I could finally breathe. And Melissa, she reminded me of something else, that not everyone who walks into your life is meant to stay. Some people are there to help you burn down the old house, to hand you the match and stand beside you as you watch it fall. And when the fire goes out, they don't stay to help you rebuild. They go where they need to go. And so do you. There's no final confrontation, no redemption arc, no neat bow tied around the end of this story. Claire lives with her sister now. She doesn't teach anymore. Nathan's name disappeared from the ClearPath website like he was never there. Last I heard, he moved to Arizona, or maybe Florida. It doesn't matter. Because this story, my story, isn't about what happened to them. It's about what I chose next. Iceland was colder than I expected, quieter than I imagined, but the silence didn't scare me. It welcomed me. I stood under the northern lights, wrapped in layers and wonder, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Wholeness. Not because I had fixed what was broken, but because I had finally let it go. So if you're standing in the wreckage of a life someone else set fire to, don't waste your breath asking why. Don't beg for an apology you already know won't come. Tell the truth. Hold your ground. Then walk toward the version of yourself that doesn't shrink. Because the people who broke you don't get to decide how you heal. You do. My stomach twisted, but not from the betrayal, from the precision. How many dinners had I skipped making because Claire claimed she was exhausted? How many weekends had I let her go, believing her lies because I thought trusting her made me strong? I was done being strong. Now I was focused. We worked through lunch, mapping out each digital step. For every message we released, we'd have metadata. For every accusation, proof, screenshots, timestamps, receipts. We kept the tone clinical. No emotional commentary, no vengeance language. Just facts and silence. Rage gives them something to grab onto, Melissa said. But quiet. Quiet makes people squirm. When we wrapped the planning session, she leaned back in her chair, stretching her neck. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the window streaked with tiny rivers of water. The light had shifted, the gray of morning giving way to that strange, soft gold Portland sometimes gifted us, like an apology for being so gloomy. I looked at her then, really looked, not as the woman betrayed by the same man who stole my wife, but as someone who had chosen to fight differently. She didn't scream. She didn't spiral. She sharpened. "You okay?" I asked. She considered the question. "I don't know, but I'm ready." I nodded slowly. "That's more than most." She stood, pulling her coat tight, her eyes softer than before. "You know," she said, adjusting her gloves, "when I first read your message, I almost didn't come. I thought, maybe this wasn't real, or maybe I didn't want it to be." "And now?" I asked. She smiled, bittersweet. "Now I think I'm finally breathing again." As she walked out, I stayed behind, sipping the last of my coffee, staring at the plan we'd drawn out on napkins, on legal pads, on screens, and heart still bruised. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore, not really. I was thinking about clarity. And clarity, I was learning, had a body count. The night Claire had been dreaming of for months arrived cloaked in soft spring air and the nervous hum of celebration. The district educator award ceremony was being held at Jefferson High's restored auditorium. Red velvet seats, gold accents, chandeliers that probably hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. Outside, sunlight faded slowly over the Portland skyline, turning the clouds rose-tinted and tender, like even the weather had decided to behave for the occasion. Claire had spent all afternoon getting ready. I watched her from the bedroom doorway, still pretending. She stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the neckline of her navy blue dress, the one she bought specifically for this night. It hugged her in all the right places. Her hair was swept into a soft chignon, makeup applied with careful precision, just enough to say, "I'm humble, but I know I belong here." She caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled at me. That same performative smile she'd given reporters at conferences. I mirrored it. That was the role I was playing now. Supportive husband, devoted partner, the man who had her back. She didn't know what was coming. Not yet. The ceremony began just past 7. We sat near the front, Claire's name printed neatly in the program, her title highlighted with golden stars. Teachers around us leaned over to congratulate her. Some told stories about how she had changed their classroom culture. Others whispered about how she was the leading candidate to become department head next fall. She ate it all up, smiling, nodding, offering demure chuckles as if she were somehow surprised by her own success. I kept checking my watch. 7:10 p.m., the moment we agreed on. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket, opened the email draft titled "To Whom It May Concern," and hit send. The recipients, her principal, the superintendent, the awards committee, and, because Melissa insisted, 2 education journalists who were covering the ceremony for the district newsletter. Attached, the folder of neatly labeled PDFs, screenshots, and calendar logs, compiled with time-stamped elegance. At the top of the email I wrote only, "Before you honor a teacher, you should know the lessons they teach when they think no one is watching." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Claire was leaning forward, eyes bright, as the announcer called out the first few names of the evening. A few moments later, I watched the principal pull his phone from his lap, glance down, and freeze. He leaned over to whisper to the superintendent. They both started scrolling. One row behind them, a woman I didn't recognize frowned and began whispering to the person beside her. Then came the ripple. Small at first, like a stone tossed into still water. Heads began to turn. Chairs creaked. Whispers evolved into hushed murmurs. Phones lit up across the auditorium. Some people pretended to read the program, but their eyes kept darting to the staff seated at the front. Claire noticed. Her smile faltered her ever so slightly. "What's going on?" she asked me, voice low. "Not sure," I lied, keeping my expression neutral. When her name was finally announced, there was a polite applause, less enthusiastic than she expected. Still, she stood and made her way to the stage with the confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. I watched her approach the podium, watched the way she scanned the room, looking for approval, validation, praise. Then I saw her freeze. From the stage, she could see the superintendent holding a phone to his chest, his face pale, expression unreadable. One of the committee members turned away from her as she spoke, unable to meet her eyes. Claire's voice cracked on the first sentence of her speech. She cleared her throat, forced a smile, and tried again. "It's an honor to be here tonight." But the spell was broken. She could feel it. The center of attention. Yes, but not in the way she had imagined. I clapped with everyone else. Just enough. Not too much. By the time dessert was served, half the room was buzzing with discreet questions. The principal had left the table. The superintendent was on a phone call just outside the auditorium doors. Claire kept trying to smile, but her shoulders were taut, her fingers twitching at her sides. She turned to me finally, leaning in. "Mark," she whispered, "did something happen?" I took a sip of water and met her eyes. "Yes," I said softly. "Something happened." Her eyes widened, but I stood before she could ask anything else. I placed my napkin on the table, buttoned my jacket, and said the last words I'd ever say to her in a public setting. "Check your email." And I walked away. Outside, the air had cooled. The trees lining the parking lot swayed gently in the wind, their blossoms shedding petals like confetti at a funeral. I pulled out my phone and texted Melissa 2 words. "It's done." Her reply came instantly. "Good. My turn." The following night was the ClearPath Gala, an annual tech showcase masquerading as a charity event. Nathan, of course, would be center stage, and so would Melissa. She arrived alone, in a black silk gown that made people turn when she entered. She had prepared her materials just as we'd discussed. Manila envelopes for the board members, a USB drive for the financial director, and a series of blind drops scheduled to hit inboxes at 9:30 p.m. Exactly as Nathan would be taking the mic. When the lights dimmed and Nathan was introduced, she waited. He walked out smiling, eyes gleaming under stage lights, a man in full command of his image. And then the screens behind him, meant to display a sizzle reel of his company's achievements, glitched, briefly, a flicker. And then an image appeared. A hotel invoice dated from one of his client meetings, and another. A calendar overlay showing a company retreat aligned perfectly with Claire's grading conference. Then texts. Someone in the audience gasped. Nathan turned around, and everything unraveled. The board didn't wait. Melissa watched as men in suits began whispering urgently to each other, rising from their tables. Phones buzzed. The financial director walked out, face unreadable. Nathan stood alone on stage, staring into the light. No applause, no cues. And Melissa, composed, radiant, calm, picked up her glass of champagne, sipped slowly, and smiled. Her part was done. Mine, too. But as I stood under the glow of a parking lot street lamp and watching the end of someone else's performance from a distance, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. We hadn't destroyed anything. We had simply revealed the truth and watched it do the work for us. The next morning, Portland woke to headlines. Not tabloid trash or gossip column blurbs, but carefully worded press releases, shared in digital whispers across business news sites, tech blogs, and educator forums. Ethical concerns shake ClearPath leadership amid internal audit. Controversy shadows District Educator of the Year and an honoree. The words were restrained, almost clinical, but the implication was a hammer blow. I sat at my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, watching the fallout unfold like a slow-motion avalanche. The inbox on my old photography website, long dormant, was overflowing. Some were from people I knew vaguely. Former colleagues, old classmates, people from Claire's social circle I barely remembered. Most of them opened the same way. I don't mean to pry, but I didn't answer any of them. Claire texted me 7 times before noon. I didn't open a single message.